I haven't ever been overbearing and we're going to do this and we're going to do that and you're going to go see this. I just say, if you want my help.
For years, Vince Gill stayed quiet, performing on stage with a calm smile, blending into the harmonies of one of the greatest rock bands in history. But behind that gentle presence was a truth he never dared to speak aloud. Until now. At 67, the country legend finally broke his silence about what it really felt like to step into the Eagles after Glenn Frey's death. The pressure, the fear, the overwhelming weight of replacing a man millions believed was irreplaceable. Vince didn't just join a band. He stepped into a legacy guarded fiercely by fans who weren't sure they wanted him there at all. And for years, he carried that burden quietly, respectfully, and almost invisibly. But before we understand what Vince revealed, we must return to the moment everything changed, the day Don Henley made a phone call that would alter his life forever. The call that changed everything. Glenn Frey's absence and the impossible job no one wanted. When Glenn Frey died in 2016, the world mourned the loss of a rock icon. But inside the Eagles, the grief was deeper, darker, and paralyzing. Frey wasn't just a founding member. He was the band's backbone, its attitude, its edge, its California swagger. His absence was a crater, and the remaining members, Don Henley, Joe Walsh, Timothy B. Schmidt, felt it every single day. For months. They didn't speak about the future. The rehearsals stopped. The instruments were packed away. Don Henley privately admitted, "I don't see a path forward." To him, the Eagles without Glenn Frey felt like a contradiction, a betrayal, a wound that couldn't be stitched shut. But there was one problem. Millions of fans still needed the Eagles. Their music still filled stadiums. Their harmonies were still unmatched. And more importantly, Glenn's legacy couldn't simply end with silence. So Don Henley did something he never imagined. He picked up the phone and called a man who wasn't a rocker, wasn't part of the 70s California scene, and wasn't expected by anyone. Vince Gill. Vince wasn't just shocked. He was intimidated. He knew exactly what Glenn Frey meant to the world. He knew fans would compare him to a ghost, a legend, an irreplaceable voice. He knew people would walk into arenas with folded arms, ready to judge, ready to reject. His first instinct was to say no. "I can't replace Glenn Frey," Vince told Don. Don replied, "We're not asking you to replace him. We're asking you to honor him." And that's what changed everything. Vince Gill walked into the first rehearsal, trembling. He barely slept the night before. The band played the opening chords of "Take It Easy," and Vince felt a chill run down his spine. Glenn's shadow loomed over every note. But when Vince opened his mouth to sing, something happened. The room softened. The band leaned in, and Don Henley gave him a look that simply said, "Yes, this can work." Still, if the band felt that way, the fans certainly didn't, not yet. And Vince would soon realize that stepping on stage with the Eagles wasn't just an honor. It was a battlefield, the battle for acceptance, judgment, pressure, and the moment everything shifted. The first tour with Vince Gill was brutal, not because of the music. Vince nailed every harmony, every guitar line, every emotional nuance of Glenn's catalog. It was brutal because of the fans. Many walked into the arenas convinced that no one, especially a country singer, had the right to sing Glenn Frey's songs. Vince felt their eyes on him every night, cold, skeptical, unforgiving. He later admitted, "I kept my head down. I didn't want to take up too much space. I wanted the music to speak for itself." But the moment that haunted him most was one song. "Take It to the Limit." Glenn Frey used to sing it with heartbreaking vulnerability, stretching those final lines into the heavens. When Vince prepared to sing it for the first time, the arena fell silent. Not respectful silence. Tense silence. as if everyone was collectively thinking, "Let's see if this guy can handle it." Vince started softly. His voice was steady but trembling inside. Then he reached the chorus. Something shifted. The harmonies wrapped around him like a shield. And the audience felt it, the sincerity, the humility, the respect. By the second verse, shoulders softened. By the final high note, the crowd exploded into applause. That was the turning point. Vince didn't win the fans with bravado, he won them with vulnerability. And once they accepted him, the band embraced him in a way he never expected. But that acceptance came with a cost. Vince had to bury parts of himself. He refused to perform his own hits during Eagles shows, even when Don Henley suggested it. Most musicians would jump at the chance to spotlight their solo success. But Vince didn't. "I didn't want to give fans one more reason to doubt me," he said. "This wasn't about me. It was about them, and it was about Glenn." Night after night, Vince stood on stage singing songs he didn't write, songs that belonged to another man, carrying the emotional weight of a legacy that wasn't his. He became the quiet guardian of the Eagles' past, even if it meant silencing pieces of his own identity. But deep inside, Vince felt a tug, the ache of missing his solo career, his voice, his musical roots, and eventually, that ache would lead him to confront a truth he had avoided for years. The keeper of a legacy, identity, sacrifice, and Vince Gill's quiet transformation. By the time Vince turned 67, something inside him began to shift. Fans adored him, critics praised him, the band trusted him. And yet, Vince felt oddly invisible, like a man living two different lives at once. On one hand, he was a respected Eagles member, singing "Lion Eyes," "New Kid in Town," and "Take It Easy" with reverence. On the other hand, he was a country icon whose own catalog, decades of heartfelt, chart-topping work, was gathering dust while he sang someone else's story. In a rare moment of honesty, Vince admitted, "I miss my songs. I miss the part of me that wasn't afraid to be seen." It wasn't bitterness, it was longing. The Eagles gave him stability, camaraderie, purpose, but they also demanded emotional sacrifice for years. Vince walked on stage wearing Glenn Frey's legacy like a heavy coat, one he carried with respect, but one that never truly fit his shoulders. Yet what kept him going was the love and trust from Don Henley. Don chose Vince not because of fame, but because of character. He once said, "Vince doesn't act like a star. That's why he was the right choice." Joe Walsh and Timothy B. Schmidt shared that sentiment. The band, once fractured by loss, found healing in Vince's quiet loyalty. And somewhere along the journey, Vince realized something profound. He wasn't just filling Glenn Frey's spot. He was helping keep the Eagles alive. That truth gave him peace. Today, Vince balances both worlds, preparing a new solo album while continuing to tour with Eagles. He calls every performance of Hotel California an honor, and every night on stage with Don Henley a blessing. He is no longer the outsider. He is no longer the substitute. He is part of the fabric, stitched into the band forever. And now, after years of silence, Vince Gill finally feels ready to share what carrying that legacy really meant. In the end, Vince Gill's journey with the Eagles is not a story about stepping into a spotlight. It's a story about stepping into a shadow. The shadow of Glenn Frey. The shadow of a band that defined an entire era. The shadow of millions of fans who weren't ready to let go. And yet, Vince walked into that darkness with humility, reverence, and a kind of courage that doesn't roar. It whispers. At 67, he finally admits what he never dared to say before, that joining the Eagles was the most intimidating moment of his career, that he often questioned himself, that he sometimes felt invisible, that he wasn't sure if fans would ever open their hearts. But he also admits something else, something softer, more beautiful, more human. He says it became the greatest honor of his life, because Vince Gill didn't just fill a vacancy, he carried a legacy, he kept a promise, he helped hold together a band that could have disappeared in grief. And along the way, he learned that music isn't about ownership, it's about service, it's about lifting up the memories of those who came before, it's about honoring the songs that shaped generations, it's about giving every night everything you have, even when the songs aren't yours. Now, as Vince stands on stage singing "Take It Easy," he no longer feels like a guest. He no longer feels like a substitute. He feels like a guardian, one of the last men keeping the heartbeat of the Eagles alive. And as the crowd rises to their feet, applauding not just the music, but the man who carried it forward, Vince Gill finally understands. He wasn't chosen to replace Glenn Frey. He was chosen to protect him, and he has done exactly that with grace, humility, and a voice strong enough to keep a legend breathing.